You don't have to make it all the way to the wall, guys. A little overzealous there.
I threw it back, guys.
Okay, so stand in a circle. Yes, you will be holding hands. Okay, because that is the game. It's called Ring Around the Rosies. And this does have historical significance that we will talk about today. Okay, so everybody grab hands. Okay, and the song goes, ring around the rosies, pockets full of ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Okay, so, ring around the rosies, what is it actually about? It is about the plague. So why are the pockets full of posies? So you do not smell the rotting flesh. Why are there ashes? They're burning the dead bodies so the infection doesn't spread. And why do we all fall down?
Because you're dead.
We all die. Okay, so go ahead and move the desks back, get back in your seats.
Oh, great. I can't get up, guys.
I can't get up. All right.
You're supposed to be observing the class, not recording it.
No. Wait, we're ready to go.
Oh, man. Tristan landed on my head. He shattered it.
Okay, so we had our activity, ring around the rosies, reliving our childhood and then telling the awful truth. Okay. So, right here we have our learning objective of the day. So, what is our objective, Rachel? It's the one that's not in bread.
I could explain how quickly the plague spread through the British Empire using in a paragraph.
Good. So, you guys are going to use internal citations and write a paragraph based on an article again. It's the same exact thing we did yesterday. Okay? So, we're talking about transitioning from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. And a huge part of this is the plague. Something really, really, really awful. Okay? So how does something awful turn into something ultimately good that helps create the modern world?
They learn from their mistakes about like hygiene.
Well, that is one of the big things that comes out of it, for sure. So, where we left off, we had the Crusades. Crusades got people interested in going to Asia, so we had the Polo family that went to China, particularly Marco Polo, and people get all excited because of his descriptions. They want to reopen the silk trade routes. Well, something happens when Marco Polo comes home. When Marco Polo gets back, a few years after, the Bubonic Plague starts in China. Starts getting really, really bad. Okay? What would happen is these fleas would be infected with the plague. And the fleas would attack rats. Okay? And the fleas would infect the rats. Rats are infamous for being able to travel long distances and keep themselves very well hidden. They're very sneaky. Okay? So as people were trading on the Silk Road, the rats came along for the ride with the fleas. Okay? And they would infect animals and people as they went. All it takes is a bite or a scratch from the animals and they spread the infection. Okay? So there were massive deaths in China, in India, in the Middle East. somehow Africa didn't get all that affected by it, which is very strange because there was a lot of trade going into Africa from Asia during this period of time. But for some reason, the Africans did not suffer very many deaths from this at all, which is very, very peculiar. Okay? The absolute worst place that was hit was Europe. Okay? Europeans at this time period did not wash themselves regularly. They did not wash their hands very much, and a few would bathe once, twice a year. Okay? It was very common to have full-grown adults who had never bathed in their lives. Okay? Bubonic plague spreads very quickly by touch. Okay? And, from human to human. And because they were not washing themselves, the plague was able to spread very, very quickly. Okay? So what made things even worse is that we also had what's called a Little Ice Age at this point. Now, the Little Ice Age was 500 years long. The only real catastrophic time was during this time, was when the Ice Age was just starting. Because what happened was, we had a Little Ice Age, the world's temperature dropped, so the growing season became shorter. People were still adapting to that, and so it was very difficult. So basically, you are either dying of a plague or starving to death. So a lot of people are dying all at once.
Would the fact that most of the trade routes for Africa being through the sea be the fact that they didn't get it? Or would it also just not really explain ever why they didn't get it?
I don't understand why the sea would make a difference, because rats jump on boats and are, have always been infamous for being stowaways on ships. So I honestly do not understand why Africa wasn't hit. And when I read about it, there was really not an explanation given that was satisfactory to me. So maybe one of you will be able to find the answer, but I was not able to. But that is a good thought. Most of the trade with Africa was done by sea, not over land. So today we also have a lot of germs going around. What's one of the big scary germs that we have going around today? Flu. Flu kills people. Flu kills a lot of people. Ebola. Ebola is one of the ones that the media talks about a lot. Okay, I've heard people tell me that in 20 years, every person on the planet will be infected with Ebola. I'm like, what? Okay, bubonic plague was a lot deadlier and a lot faster spreading than Ebola. Ebola, the nice thing about Ebola is that you are only contagious for a short period of time. So if you know you've gotten Ebola, all you have to do is quarantine yourself or get yourself quarantined, and then you don't infect anyone and it doesn't spread anymore. Okay. One thing that was surprising with my research about bubonic plague is that today, 60% of the people that get it, if they do not seek immediate medical attention, will still die. Because, in studying this in the past, people have always told me, well, we've got antibiotics now, it's no big deal. Black Death's no big deal anymore, we got antibiotics. But if you don't get those treatments, there's still a 60% chance that you will die. Okay, so Black Death is still a killer. The bubonic plague is still real, it's still out there, it still kills. Okay, so you guys should have the main ideas from the slide by now. So we'll go on to the next one. Okay, so the Renaissance is a result of people seeking greater learning, wanting to improve the world, and also it's a result of trying to recover from this terrible disease. Okay? And both of these effects happen thanks to the Crusades, which we talked about yesterday. Okay? A lot of things happen to Europe because of this plague and because of the Crusades. Okay? Kings become a lot stronger. The feudal system doesn't work anymore. Because the way the feudal system worked was the king was on top, but really had very little direct authority. He had to rely on the lords to do everything. And the lords each had an army of knights. Okay? Well, the population's now really, really small in comparison to what it was. So it doesn't really make sense to have one particular class of people do all the fighting anymore. Doesn't really make sense for the king to rely on all these nobles versus just do everything himself. Okay? And something really remarkable happens in that third period. Tristan, can you read that third dot?
So
Serfs, yeah.
Serfs had always been told that they were put in their place by God, and if they would behave, they would be rewarded in heaven. The plague devastated peasants' population who had to do the bulk of work and pay the bulk of the taxes. Angry peasants in England rebelled against serfdom and wanted their freedom.
Okay, so we're going back to really old vocabulary. What was a serf? It is a lot like less than a peasant. Okay, the word serf comes from the French word for slave. 90% of Europe's population were serfs. Okay, they did all the work, they paid all the taxes, they were basically slaves. And if they tried to leave the estate of their lord, they were killed. Okay, it was forced labor. So imagine you're a serf. You're told your whole life that this is what your life is like. It's like that because God did it. You know, as long as you're good, everything's going to be fine. As long as you're good, you'll go to paradise. Blah 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 blah. Well, then this bubonic plague happens. All these people just die and die and die, and you know, it made a lot of these serfs question the whole system. And question the church, question the king, question everything. So they rebelled. And basically, in England at least, it was decided that it no longer made sense to have serfdom because the population had shrunk so much that they couldn't afford to run the world the way run their country the way they were used to. Okay? So peasants have new opportunities. Former serfs can now do other things. Okay? Because there's no knights anymore, you know, people still have the title of knight, but it's not the same anymore. Now it's just a title. They're not automatically given positions in the military. Okay? Peasants are now able to fight. Peasants are now able to do other jobs. Okay? So this is really where we start to leave the ancient world and transition into more of the modern. Okay? Serfdom did end in England during this time, but it did not end everywhere. Russia would continue to have serfs into the 1800s. So very modern. lot of other contributing factors to the plague that we didn't mention, one of which was cats. Cats were thought of as evil during the Middle Ages, so people killed cats or drove them away. Those cats would have been nice to have around to kill the rats. Yes? Probably. But at least the cat would have killed the rat so that the rat wouldn't have spread its fleas to you. Yeah, that's a good point too. And technically too, if you think about it, cats and dogs can also spread it to humans. So having a cat wouldn't necessarily save you from the plague.
Put the cat in the room for the practice. Slaughter the cat. Or where
Rats are also predators, so if you put too many rats with a cat, the rats will win. Anyway. Okay, so let's go ahead and move along since we have time to talk about cats and rats. Okay, so here we have bubonic plague and Ebola. Okay, where does that phrase come from since you guys are laughing? You have much to learn in grasshopper.
We have much to learn in grasshopper.
There's a really old TV show called Kung Fu, and the Kung Fu master always called his student grasshopper. You have much to learn, grasshopper. Okay, so we have an article about the plague's progress in the British Isles, which will give you guys an idea of just how fast and deadly bubonic plague really was. You guys will write a paragraph about it using internal citations. Okay, and it needs to follow this sequence. Introductory sentence, evidence with internal citation, explanation of evidence, evidence with internal citation, explanation of evidence, explanation, and summary. Okay? So this article is a lot longer than yesterday's article, which is why we kind of went through everything so quickly today. So one more thing I want to show you. This is the grading rubric I'm going to be using to grade these paragraphs. Okay. So here is each of the requirements with the expectation, and you'll be rated on each one as either weak, okay, good, or strong. And I will be giving each of you comments. Okay, are there any questions at this point? Okay, so let's go ahead and pass out the article. Set that down for now. That might be two. This is one.
Needs to do. You said this is two, right?
Wasn't that on what?
Yes.
traveled on the Silk Road. Pages.
What, exactly what years did the bubonic plague last?
That is a
It's
very
in its
good
prime.
question. The bubonic plague made it to England in 1348, according to this. So, and Marco Polo, I think, was born in 1225. He went to China when he was 17, and he left when he was 17. So, okay, is there anyone that does not have a copy of the Black Death? Oh. Yep. Remember, the pages on the printout are double-sided.
Okay, come on, Grace, go read it now. Here's one to read out loud.
How do you say it now? How do you say I love you in alcohol?
I do not know.
I thought you would know.
I only know Spanish and English.
How about Spanish?
Spanish, I love you is te amo.
Oh, to read all those
How about Japanese? How about Korean? How about
Yep. Which is why you have about 20 minutes.
What hours would you say now? Let's go read this now. The Black Death. The Black Death is like how do you say
I don't know about Navajo, but in Spanish it would be La Muerte Negra. La Muerte Negra.
I'm trying.
De Negra. So go ahead and read through it. Why don't you just read through it? We can do translation later. One nice thing about this article is that it doesn't make you hunt for the author's name. It puts it right at the top. that first page. Oh. At the very end of the article, I've read most of this, but at the very, very end, it says that the plague kept coming back from time to time until the 17th century, which would have been the 1600s. So they would have outbreaks of plague every now and then, over 300 years. So, going back to our explanation right here, you're going to write a paragraph that's going to follow that example, okay? Where you have an introductory sentence, okay? And that needs to basically state the topic. So, the plague spread quickly across Britain. Okay? Evidence with internal citation. Why do you say that the plague spread quickly? Okay? Or if you really want to go against everything, you could be like, plague spread slowly. But no matter what stance you take, plague spread, you have to back it up with evidence from the article. Okay? So you make your statement. This is what you believe, basically, based off of what you've read. This is the evidence that supports what you said. Okay? Then explain your evidence. Why does this prove that you're right? More evidence with another citation, then you explain it, and then you sum it up. Done. Okay? So go ahead and read through as much of the article as you can, and then write that. Okay? So, see that clock is off. You look up the time. It's 1:04. So we have about 20, there's 20 minutes exactly till the end of class. We want you to be done before that, so you have about 15 to 18 minutes. Doing okay? Oh, something that I meant to ask you earlier but forgot. Does anyone know what that is a picture of?
A crow. It's the mask that doctors wore
Yeah.
to not get sick.
Yeah, that is the mask that doctors would wear when treating plague victims so that they wouldn't get the plague. A lot of historians have a lot of historians have made fun of this costume because it just looks so silly. But at the same time, they couldn't directly touch the victims. They couldn't breathe in many of the germs because breathing is very restricted in those things. It's very hard to breathe. And so in actuality, it does prevent infection to an extent. So people have made fun of it just because of how weird it looks. It looks like they're just these giant walking birds, but it was actually effective. Yes. 114. If you have not started your paragraph, you need to at least get a start on it. Most of you have been writing, so that is good. If you guys need to discuss any evidence with each other, that is fine. Okay, you should be finishing your paragraphs now. Okay, so I am curious about some of the pieces of evidence you used. Inez, what was something that you said in your paragraph?
I talked about how after the bubonic plague spread through England and across the Irish Sea, that Scotland took advantage of that and raided them. But it also hit Scotland, calling it revenge.
Yep. Occupants of the British Isles have not always gotten along. So the Scottish raided them because they were weak, and they ended up bringing the plague back with them to Scotland. That is true. Alex, it was something that you said. You are in need of finishing very quickly. James, what was something that you wrote?
I wrote something about how they buried 200 bodies a day when the plague was in London.
That's a lot of bodies. Danielle, what was something that you wrote? Okay, good. Okay, so it sounds like you guys have cited a lot of good evidence in your paragraphs. So, hello? Yes, she is. Okay. Ms. Chi, bonus for you. Okay, so we have some review questions. One of which has already been answered by Inez, so hopefully you were paying attention to her or read it. So first one, what percentage of the British Isles were killed off by the plague? Was it 30 to 45? Okay, so if you put up one finger, it's 30 to 45. If you put up two, it's 55 to 60. If you put up three, it is 20 to 35. So everybody put up 1, 2, or 3 fingers. What percentage is it?
Then what? British Isles were killed off. One is 30 to 45%.
It was 30 to 45%. So those of you holding up one finger were correct. Okay? Because it was a third to a half that was killed off. So they estimate 30 to 45% of the population. The next one. 1 is for A, 2 is for B, 3 is for C. How did the plague get into Scotland?
Excuse the following students to the attendance office: Lane Bedoni, Crystal Bahi, Joshua Bahi, Myron Bahi, Athena Bedoni, Adriana Begay, Elena Begay,